people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Lion, it seems, to fight Caroline Dubois.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for a lot of young fighters. You know, Caroline Dubois made us an offer for Rhiannon Dixon. We made them a counter offer, about 3 times more. I guess that fight's heading to purse bid, which, you know, we would love to stage that fight. Caroline Dubois is a great talent. Rhiannon Dixon's a fantastic young fighter. So we're going to make a big play for that fight. Beatrice Ferreira's sitting right there for the belts as well. You know, she can fluctuate between lightweight and super featherweight. What a talent she is. So very exciting. You know, Katie's going to focus really on 140, and you know, she still holds 2 belts at 135 for now, so we'll see what the future is. But yeah, big news for Rhiannon Dixon coming soon.
What was yours?
Caroline Dubois herself caught wind of Eddie Hearn's comments and stated, "Let's see that offer in writing. Don't believe everything you hear." The issue here is that while Caroline Dubois would be heavily favored to beat Rhiannon Dixon, that doesn't mean that Ben Shalom would be crazy about sending her over, that he'd be willing to send or risk sending her over. That's what the purse bid could mean.
Yeah.
If it goes to purse bid, the rights to the fight go to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder might be Matchroom. And that's why Ben Shalom pulled Richard Riakporhe out of the Jai Opetaia purse bid, Fraser Clark out of the Fabio Wortley purse bid. Didn't want to risk having to send them over if Matchroom wins the bid. I think the difference between this situation, this fight, and those fights is that Caroline would be the favorite, the massive favorite, going into a Rhiannon Dixon fight. I don't think you could say that about Riakporhe versus Opetaia or Clark versus Wortley. That's the difference, that Caroline stands a good chance of winning, and I'd pick her to win if the fight materializes, though I'm still not sure it's going to. What Eddie is describing is a haggling situation, and that's what I told you would happen. As good a fight, as mouth-watering a fight, as Caroline Dubois versus Rhiannon Dixon is, it's not here and now the kind of fight that you're supposed to break the bank over. So you have to question boxers' financial commitment to seeing this fight happen, especially when Caroline is ranked at number 1 with not just 1, but 2 sanctioning bodies. She's ranked at number 1 with both the IBF and the WBC. If things aren't working out with the IBF, she can always pursue the WBC, the green belt. Go after that belt. If she were to walk away from this IBF title fight, this mandated title fight, that would elevate Rhiannon Dixon to being the highest ranked contender, and ranked right behind her is Brazil's own Olympian Beatrice Ferreira, who also happens to be a Matchroom fighter. It's the funniest thing, even though they have Beatrice ranked in the lightweight division, currently she campaigns as a super featherweight.
What?
I would sooner expect Beatrice to fight for a title at 130 than a title at 135.
Wait, what?
I'll say it again. Even though the IBF ranks Beatrice Ferreira at number 3 in the 135-pound division, she doesn't actually campaign there. She campaigns downstairs at 130, and I would sooner expect her to fight for a title at 130 than one at 135. So you're saying you think she would fight Alicia Baumgartner for one of Alicia Baumgartner's titles? Because she's undisputed at 130. She's got all the belts. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm expecting. I'm not expecting Ferreira versus Baumgartner. What I'm expecting is that Alicia is on the eve of moving up from 130 up to 135. When she does, she'll vacate the titles she's been holding at 130, at which point Beatrice can fight for one. Beatrice can fight for one of the titles, or some of the titles that Alicia used to hold.
This is confusing.
I'll make it easy for you. I'm not convinced that the Dixon versus Dubois fight happens, but I'm also not convinced that Dixon versus Ferreira happens either. I think Alicia Baumgartner might end up moving up in weight, up to 135. She doesn't have much left to do at 130. She'll vacate the titles she's held at 130, at which point Beatrice will fight for one of them. Meanwhile, at 135, now that the reset button is being hit on that division, both Rhiannon Dixon and Alicia Baumgartner, they'll fight for the titles at 135. Separately, they'll fight for separate titles. And what about Caroline Dubois? I think she'll end up fighting for a title too, even if it's not the IBF title. Maybe she'll fight for the WBC. And why are you so convinced that Caroline Dubois beats Rhiannon Dixon? It's because Caroline Dubois does everything better than Rhiannon Dixon. It's because Caroline Dubois has the amateur pedigree that Rhiannon Dixon doesn't have. Whatever Rhiannon Dixon is good at, these are the same things that Caroline Dubois is good at. She's fast, she's sharp, she's a crafty southpaw, but she's a lot stronger than Rhiannon Dixon. That's it. So if they were to fight, I would favor Caroline Dubois to win the fight, but I'm not sure there's going to be a fight due to network and promotional politics. I'm not sure Ben would send Caroline Dubois or risk having to send her over just to fight for the IBF title. She's one of his star fighters, one of his flagship fighters on Sky Sports, and Ben doesn't have the bodies to spare. Sounds convoluted and confusing, I know, but oftentimes in the build-up of a fight, that's how things can be in the sport of boxing. They can go a lot of different ways. So, we'll see if Dubois versus Dixon materializes, but I'm not confident. Men's welterweight news, Errol Spence Jr. was recently dealing with some internet trolls via the internet. A guy who goes by the name Blacklist Busa said he being Terence Crawford, is just way better than you. You're a one-trick pony. To which Errol Spence responded, you might be right, but one trick got me the Olympics, kids in private school, mom and pops retired years ago, passport full of stamps, and I don't have to pick up a glove again if I don't want to. Some of y'all forget what this shit is really for until you're 37 trying to make a comeback for 10% of what you used to make. Why are people still trolling Spence? Because it a bit about cataracts yesterday. Do you remember what he said in his Instagram stories? That the reason he got hit with all those jabs and all those hooks is because he was fighting with cataracts. A lot of people don't believe him. Former world champion Errol Smith doesn't believe him. Errol said every fighter has to do extensive eye exams every fight. They dilate your eyes and look deep with the magnifying scope. So they never saw cataracts his whole pro career. First it was the weight, now the eyes, next it'll be his asshole. Just say he was the better man and shut the fuck up. People in boxing on both sides of it, they're tired of the excuses. Stop trying to denigrate Terence Crawford's victory over you. Already see enough of that from Errol Spence Jr.'s fans without Errol Spence Jr. himself making his own excuses. Errol Spence, who said, they asked me, did I want to do the presser, showed up, no glasses, answered all the questions, heads up, gave bruh a hug for the ass whooping, good shit, and dipped. He wasn't making excuses then, but it sounds like he's making excuses now. And they're trolling him for it. Veteran trainer Stephen Breadman Edwards said, these motherfuckers are disrespectful, to which Errol Spence Jr. replied, it's cool, the Spence family appreciates them if they've been paying to watch this one-trick pony. My thoughts. I'm not a fan of Errol Spence, you guys know that, and I have some very strong opinions about him and about Al Heyman's PBC. Though it is one thing to talk about something or about someone and quite another to talk to them in such a manner. People have lost their patience for Errol Spence Jr.'s fans, and now they're losing their patience with Errol Spence himself, because this whole thing about cataracts seems like a way to denigrate Terence Crawford's victory over him. Do you think the fans are being unnecessarily harsh towards Errol Spence Jr.? Well, that depends. Do you think that the fans, Errol's fans, were unnecessarily harsh towards Terence Crawford the last 5 years in the build-up of what became the Errol Spence Jr. fight? Because it's a two-way street. The pendulum swings both ways. And how many names and how much of the blame did they lay at the feet of Terence Crawford for a fight that the PBC was delaying? Because we all know they were the ones delaying it. They were the ones dragging their feet. Now that you've seen the fight, you know why. You know why they were dragging their feet. They were afraid of what would happen, and it happened. Terence kicked his ass. To that, Errol Spence Jr. said, all that said, you can kill The retire shit, though, yeah, I got my ass beat. Shit was past due. I didn't live exactly like a boxer for the most part.
And whose fault is that?
Whose responsibility is that? It's just as much Terrence's responsibility to make sure he's living like a boxer and training like a boxer, which he has. It's just as much his responsibility as it is Errol's, with the difference being that Errol was, at least figuratively, asleep at the wheel. But that's his own fault, because it's nobody else's job to make sure he lives like a boxer. He's got to make that commitment. He's got to do that himself. And he didn't.
So that when he pays for it, he can make excuses about cataracts.
That's why people are angry. What passes for a pugilist, what passes for a boxer at Al Heyman's PBC is a boxer that isn't living like a boxer. And he admits it.
And he's not the only one.
Was Adrian Broner living like a boxer back when he was over there at the PBC? Was he living like a boxer or cosplaying a rapper? And what about Jermall Charlo? The 2.5 years that he spent away from the sport, what was he doing? Was he living like a boxer?
You can apply this formula to a lot of PBC fighters, and when you do, you just get the impression that Al Heyman's brand of boxer is a boxer that doesn't actually want to be a boxer. They want to be everything and anything else but a boxer.
Which would explain why they don't behave like boxers and train like boxers, live like boxers, which Errol Spence Jr. himself admits.
Do you remember when Errol Spence Jr.'s fans were giving Terrence Crawford shit, giving him stick late last year for booking himself a keep busy fight, like any boxer, any good boxer would do?
To come and practice, things fell apart between Terrence and Errol last year, so Terrence decided to keep busy.
And Errol's fans gave him stick for it.
So what I see is that Al Heyman is more interested in trying to build brands than build boxers, and that's why so often when his fighters step up or face somebody else's fighters, they get decimated.
Like Errol got decimated.
So if you're a fan of these guys, what are you really a fan of? In men's light heavyweight news ahead of this weekend's big light heavyweight showdown, Callum Smith is confident of Beterbiev shocker. I definitely do believe I will prove all the doubters wrong. That has yet to be determined. Do you guys out there actually like Callum's chances to upset the apple cart for the unbeaten unified champion, as Callum Smith is only days away from one of the biggest opportunities of his pro career when he faces WBO, IBF, WBC light heavyweight world champion Artur Beterbiev. Beterbiev versus Smith takes place on Saturday night at the Videotron Center in Quebec, Artur Beterbiev's adopted home, adopted country of Canada. Smith, a former super middleweight champion, is hungry to secure another world title run. If he wins...
This is just a refresher.
Just a reminder that if Callum Smith pulls this off, he will become a 2-division champion, having beaten 2 champions in order to become one himself. And that argument will be enough to get him ranked on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list per the rules that govern the list. And defeating a pound-for-pound fighter, you become one yourself. And Artur Beterbiev, who he's about to fight,
He is ranked in the bottom tier.
if Callum beats him, that will create a momentary vacancy, a vacant slot that he will immediately occupy. As Callum Smith beat George Groves for the WBA, and if he were to pull the upset this weekend for the WBC, WBO, and IBF titles, that'll get him on the list. I definitely do believe I will prove all the doubters wrong, Smith told Sky Sports. I know how good I am. I know how good he can be. Sometimes you don't really get the opportunity to show that. This time, I've got the best fight possible for me in this division, and if I win, I become a 2-weight world champion, 3 world titles. That's been the biggest motivation for me these last few camps, and I'm very, very close to achieving it. Beterbiev has stopped every single opponent in his path. Smith has never been stopped. He's been working on different strategies to deal with Beterbiev's punching power.
Could you imagine if he wins?
That would be a victory that ages well for Canelo Alvarez. Lest we forget, Callum Smith's lone defeat came at the hands of Canelo at 168 2 years ago, when Canelo beat him in one-sided fashion and took both his WBA and Ring Magazine titles. If Callum now becomes light heavyweight champion, lineal champion,
If he beats Artur, that makes Canelo's victory over him
that much more impressive. Canelo's resume, that much more impressive.
If he wins, he's been working on different strategies to deal with Artur Beterbiev's punching power. I think you've just got to be smart, Smith said. He's a big puncher, but nothing in my career so far shows that my chin's a bit suspect or anything like that. Touch wood. I've never been hit or hurt or dropped as a professional. I've always been very confident defensively. I believe I'm pretty tidy and can stay quite tight. I know the dangers.
It is true. Callum's not fragile. He's been in there with John Ryder, George Groves, Canelo Alvarez.
We've seen Callum flustered, we've seen him lose, but we've never really seen him woozy or hurt. We've never really seen him rattled or on spaghetti legs, though because this is the light heavyweight division and because Artur is a much bigger puncher than Canelo, than George Groves, than John Ryder, anything is possible. Anything can happen. You can't afford to take any silly shots. That's the difference between a good fighter and a great fighter. It's not how hard you can punch or how fast you are, it's knowing when to punch, when not to punch, the mistakes you make, limiting them down. When you're fighting a big puncher, it keeps you mentally that little bit switched on, knowing you can't afford to make any mistakes at all. 12 rounds, 36 minutes.
It's a long time to be in the ring with a puncher like Artur.
But I have seen it said in some circles, small ones, that Callum might pull it off this weekend because Artur is some years older than Callum, because Artur hasn't been that active the last couple of years. To that, need I remind you that neither has Callum. He may have been at light heavyweight a while now, but he's only actually had 2 fights there. That Callum Smith, he could stand to be a bit more active himself, and whether or not I like his chances against Artur, while some people do,
I don't.
I don't trust him, even though I understand that he could always catch Artur Beterbiev with a catch and counter left hook or perhaps a long-range right hand well from the outside, as Callum Smith is very tall and very long as far as light heavyweights go. I understand there's a possibility that he nails Artur Beterbiev and gets him out of there. I don't trust him.
I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm saying I don't trust it to happen. I don't trust Callum.
Trust him to manage the distance behind the jab against a bigger puncher than John Ryder was. John Ryder, who flustered him mid-range to inside, managed the distance against a bigger puncher and a bigger man than Canelo Alvarez. Canelo, who had his way with Callum mid-range to inside. What you notice about Callum is that if you can get inside on him, mid-range to inside,
he's vulnerable, and it's because of those long arms.
Callum might be long and limber for the weight, but mid-range to inside, that makes him vulnerable. He needs room to get his punches off because his arms are so long. At that proximity, it would be Artur that has the advantage. It would be Artur.
You let John Ryder get close to you. Canelo get close to you.
So who says Artur can't get close to you? He's a bigger man than those fighters are, and a bigger puncher with the kind of punching power that can elicit a lot of respect from his opponents. It's disarming when you feel the wind from those punches or the brunt of them on your arms as you try to protect yourself. This guy hits so hard, you might not want to throw, and if you don't throw, how do you keep him off?
That's why I don't trust him.
He was flustered by John Ryder, who crowded the pocket, and overpowered by Canelo, who's naturally smaller than Artur, and I'm supposed to believe that he's going to get Artur out of there. I would have to see it to believe it.
Callum's a strong puncher. I don't dismiss that.
Your power is only as effective as your ability to let your hands go, and I can't trust that Callum will, that when he feels the weight behind Artur's punches, he won't get gun-shy, and if he does, this fight is over.
The fight is lost.
Yeah, Callum's never been knocked out before, but how many times has he fought a puncher like Artur?
There's a first time for everything.
And this weekend, Callum might get knocked out for the first time.